Hey, it is now September 2023, and I told a friend I would build his recording studio desktop rack mounts for all his recording equipment in February. So I'm going to tell you, Goo, I'm finally getting to it. We're going to build out some killer case goods for you, and there's a lot of technique in this video for anybody who wants to build these, building beveled case goods. So what we want to do is we're going to start the conturo, and we're going to put 1mm edge banding. We're going to apply it as we go down the board and let the conturo do its work. So we take the Festool clipper, we feed it in, and we guillotine the edge here. That way there we're short a flush edge to the end of the board. So now we have to trim the banding flush to the top of the board, and we use the MFK 700 from Festool to trim it perfectly flush at a 1.5 degree angle base. So you have to rely on the accuracy of your tools, and one of the biggest tools or the best tools in the shop is this, the multifunction table. But you gotta make sure that you have everything set up at a perfect 90, and you gotta make sure you have a fantastic square to do this. Okay, first thing you wanna do is you wanna make sure that this is absolutely perfectly 90. So I like to use Post-it notes in here just to check. Make sure you have a reference here and bring it in, and that's tight, and then you can go and tighten these two screws. So we got our rips done, we've got our edge banding done, we've got our trimming down. Now comes to cross-cutting the bevel. And that's really tough to do sometimes, to eliminate the one thing that, to make a perfect beveled box, you want to eliminate tear out. In a variety of ways, what you want to do is you want to make sure that that long point is crisp with zero tear out, so you have a perfect match here. But more important, right here, okay? That edge banding, forward and aft, there should be no tear out, and there isn't. So that's why today I'm going to step you through a technique that I have used over the years, using backing boards, a track saw, and the MFT table. Okay, so this is going to be the center console or center rack. There's going to be a monitor up top here, and this is what is known as a 2U unit. And when I say 2U, it means it holds two of these. Whether for a recording studio, but I grabbed this. This is part of a server. They're all the same. The dimension from here to here, okay, is 19 inches. Now, I will go and give you the metric equivalent shortly. This is a 2U unit, so the dimension is determined on the brackets I ordered. There's going to be two more that we're going to build today, and they're going to be both 4U units. They're going to be taller. And we're going to do them out of the same walnut. Here's the point I'm trying to get across. The measurements are not from outside, because that's the miter. The measurement needs to be taken from the short point. So we have that critical measurement. I added basically a 1/16 or 2 millimeters inside for wiggle room. And there is wiggle room here, and these are just attached. These are standards, whether for a server rack or an audio studio rack. Okay, so hear me out on this, because this is kind of cool. I could just take this and cut a bunch of pieces and put them together. And the typical person may not notice it, but what I want to do is show you how to cut the pieces and make sure the flow of the grain continues around the box. It's called waterfalling or grain continuation. So that's how we're going to cut this. So this whole process is to avoid that number one thing called tear out. Now, the tear out, when I'm cutting from the top, is handled by this, because the splinter guard holds it from, as the rotation of the blade, let's get in here so you can see this. When the blade comes up, not here, but when it comes out of the cut, it wants to lift and tear out. So that's why the splinter guard. So that's one way splinter-free cuts are available. But what we want to do is we want to control this. And as I come out of it, I can chip that front edge. And you'll see that a mile away on this walnut edge banding. So what I'm going to do is I call this the sandwich technique. I put backer boards in here just like this. Now, what's also critical about this is this backer board should be the same thickness. I ripped this out of a scrap piece of the walnut plywood I have. The third way is right here is your MDF top, the support. And the bottom is always, well, not always, but the majority of the time going to be splinter free. And you'll see how we do that when we use the off cut. I have a great technique to show you that because small pieces are hard to repeat underneath the rail. Okay, so one of the first cuts I want to do to start this, so I have grain continuation, I want to do the side pieces. And from the top, I want to cut this at a 45. So with those backer boards, you want to check the front edge, back edge, but also from the top here. I usually use a fingernail like this to see if there's any tear out, and there's 0.0. So that was the setup. Now what I want to do is we're going to flip it over, because look, this is my top, right? Top of the case. I want to cut from the inside, and I'll show you a technique I use because we're going to be cutting this way, and the off fall is what we're going to be using. The key to all of this is to have perfect repeatability, because we're going to be cutting 4 sides and 4 tops and bottoms. Okay, remember the measurement is for the short point. We have our backer boards here for tear out. We're going to be utilizing the splinter guard from the short point, and you know it's going to be splinter free, but also the MDF top acts as a splinter guard. Usually the bottom of the cut, because of the geometry of the blade, is splinter free. And that's our long point. That's the critical one. But the way I want to cut this, and I've done this a few times over the years, it really works out because short pieces underneath the rail are real difficult to get repeatability. So here is the 4-unit bracket that I got from Nave Point, and I'll measure it first. It's 7 inches. I could do the math and add a 1/16 to 1/8 on there for the height inside what? The box or the case. But I'll do it in metric now. It's 174. We want to add a few millimeters to that. So instead of doing all that math, there's a few things we got to incorporate. So I'm going to take the bracket itself and bring it just like this, okay? And bring it up where? The cut line, the bracket. And if I do this correctly, we have to incorporate something. The blade thickness, because we're going to be using the off fall or the off cut as our piece. So what we want to do is calculate a few things. We want to calculate the 1.8 millimeter, let's just say it's 2 millimeter thick blade, because you got to do that. And then also add a few more millimeters, like 2 or 3, because you want that adjustability and how do you say, mistakeability inside. You want a little wiggle room. So we'll do the measurements now. So 2 for the kerf and about 2 or 3 for wiggability. I'm going to bring it like this. I got my bracket right up here. I'm going to bring it right in, and I'll show you the measurement right here. It's basically an extra 5 to 6 millimeter. This is tough because when I'm going to make a cut on the top, okay, so I can continue that grain. But the situation is I got to cut another one of these. I need extreme repeatability on this. So I could draw a pencil mark right here and align that long point there. But what I prefer is this will cut into my MDF, big deal, but it's a really great fine reference mark. And I'll show you how to do that. So that's going to be my side piece, right? And from here to here, from the top, look at the bottom even, completely splinter free. That's what we just cut, and you'll see here all the way. It's the backer boards, it's the table, and it's the splinter guard. Combine it with a great track saw. So now I have to reestablish the bevel for that long point on the outside to continue the grain, but I don't want to go too far. Okay, so one of the things you want to do when you're cutting a bevel is make sure your hand is on the plate. That way there you're reassured you get a perfect 45. And look at that cut. Once again, no tear out, we're good. Measurement is critical in here, and from the right point, no pun intended. So we've reestablished our bevel, okay, for our top piece. So now we remember the measurement from inside, short point to short point, was what, 19 inches, okay? And we can add a little to that. So let's do it in metric. I'm going to bring it right here, and it's 480 right there. See, look, take the measurement right in there. It's 484, and if we add a little, I'm just going to bring it right here, about 487. But I have to cut it from the top. That 19 inches or 784 inside doesn't cut it, no pun intended. So what I want to do is I want to do a wrap. So I'm going to take this measurement here, bring it like this, okay, and then bring it right here. So I always do this, I do a rough. I know it has to creep out that way, but what I wanted to do is establish where my short point is on the edge of my board. Then what I do is I take what? A bevel, 45, and I bring it right to that, where that short point is. Okay, and I just scribe this out. And I always try to compensate for like my 9mm lead, just like this. So I know that's my short point. Okay, and remember, you have a little wiggle room in here. So we're gonna be cutting from this top, okay? So we get a splinter-free cut with the splinter guard. So that is the way it's gonna look. And I'm gonna take now that point. That's why a shoulder square is very important, because I can take that point here and lay it to my top and line my splinter guard with that. We have our spacers here, or our backers. We're going to take this and line it up on this line. We need what we call extreme repeatability with the MFT. So I'm gonna bring it like this. We've wrapped that line around. Now, this is what I want to point out to you. Here's my backer boards. We are ready to cut, but we have to do 3 more of these pieces for the case. What I like to do, because I want to make sure all of these are at a 90, I'm going to grab a spacer block here and bring it all right in. So bear with me. I'm going to bring it to the line again to make sure I'm right where I need to be, like this. And then I'm going to grab this board and make sure everything lines up at 90. Now the nice thing is these spacer blocks are set for the rest of the cases that we need to do. I'll just bring it in like this, and it's a nice, see how it keeps everything in line here? Okay, so let's make the cut. You see how I have it supported here so it doesn't, the off-fall doesn't drop off, and let's make the cut. Absolutely perfect end to end. So now we have to take this and continue the grain. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna utilize this line to cut the second side. But here's where it gets confusing. This is my top. I have to reestablish my long point from the outside. So I'll do that now. Okay, so remember that line we cut into the table? Here's the reason I cut it. It creates a little ledge. So I'm just gonna bring that up, and you'll see where I bring it right into that line and it actually catches. If I would have used a pencil, I would have been a little confused at how to line it up, but now I have that little catch, and you'll see all the way down, it catches perfect. I'm ready to make and reestablish that long point from underneath. So I just cut my second side. here's what I always do. Look how the long points meet up. Absolutely perfect from end to end. We are making progress. Okay, so I just reestablished the long point on the final piece of the case. Next, I'm going to take those two pieces that I used previously. They're my new gauge blocks. I'm going to bring them right up to the stop. That way there, I have repeatability at that 90. Okay, so the second case should be a whiz because I've already got my gauge blocks cut, my spacer. Very, very important when you're doing multiples of something, you don't want to mess with the grain. We got a full grain wrap now, doing it the way we did. I'm going to take this, move it off to the side so we can label it before we join it with the domino. This is the time where you take the time to label everything because when we go into the joinery phase, we don't have to think about it. We've spent a lot of time to make sure this grain is continuous. You don't want to put it together and go, oh, it doesn't match up. So let's just take the time and I'll show you how to label everything perfectly. Okay, so I'm going to label fronts. This is the front, and this will help me. F is for front. I'll do them all the way down. Okay, I'm going to turn these over and match them up underneath because this is where we're going to be doing the joinery from this face. So I'm going to take it, and this you can get discombobulated. Where's the front now? It's right here. So I'm going to go front, 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 and back over here. Okay. Next, let's label the joints. Okay, and the way I do it is I always go, this is A to A, B to B, C to shining C, and you got to label this one. This is D, and this is the one end to end that won't match up. That'll probably be the bottom. So I ripped these boards at 300 millimeters because my friend wanted them 12 inches of depth, close to it. So what I did is I added 1 millimeter, so I'm at 302. Half of 302 is 151. So I'm going to lay out a line here at 151 all the way down the boards, and this will give me my center or close to center when I set up for the domino. The center line is close to center. This one is going to be an elongated one with slop. The one from the front will always be tight, and this one will do loose. We'll use the flat from here, and we'll use our eye on this. So it gives us a little bit of wiggle room, but that'll bring us right in tight right here. So this is 18 millimeter plywood, or so I thought. And that's what I'm going to coach you on. So I've always, on 18 millimeter ply, I've always worked from the bevel, from the short point with the domino down here, the plate here. And I used a 5x30, going 15 and 15. It gives me a little wiggle room at the end so I don't have what is known as tear out or blow through. Well, I was caught with this one. I had everything set on my domino perfect. Okay, and then what happened is I did this one. I go, okay, I'm all set. Then I came over here on the center line and I got a little blow through and I said, what is going on? And then I got this. So let me show you. This right here is where I didn't have blowout, and you'll see it's 18 millimeter ply, or very close, right? But as I go through the board, you're gonna see it undulates. Look at this, is all the way to 17.8. Down here it's 17.9. Let's go to this side where we had the problem, and you're gonna see it's 17.8. So that little bit is all you're left with if you use a 15. So what I'm getting at is, for this project or this build, we're gonna use a 4x20 domino, the smaller one, and you'll see how it's just as strong. Okay, so remember, we're going to work at the top of the bevel here. We want to place our 4x20 right here so we don't have blow through. So what we'll do is we set the bevel first, it's 45, and then we take this gauge block and take it all the way out. So our height of our plate and angle of our plate is set. You can see where that touches the metal right there. Now here's the confusing part, and I brought out all the cutters. There's a, for the 500, there's a 5, a 6, an 8, and a 10. Here's the 4. So the confusing part of this is if we look at all of these, the 5 through 10, they're all the same length. This 4 millimeter is 10 millimeters short. So here's the confusing, follow me. The setting on here to go equidistant into each side, you set your domino depth on the 500 to 20. It actually is only plunging 10 millimeters because this is 10 millimeters short. So there you go. That's half of 20 is 10. So you're gonna see where I'm working on top of the table, not off of the table. It's not needed because when I place my domino here, you're gonna see where it's not touching the table and it sits completely flat on top of my material. So this is my front. So I will be using, and maybe we can get in here and see this, I will be using the flat from here in the tight setting. I'll switch it when the motor's running. I'll come over here and I'll do loose. And then what I'll do is I'll come in here and I'll capture the cursor on that mark right there that I have. And keep that loose. And then I'll go over here and do this tight, loose, and loose. That's why you label everything, because see, that's the front and that's the front, and those are the ones I needed tight. And I came over and you're gonna see perfect alignment. So I got them just dry fitted together, but before I go into glue up and clamp up, let's see how well we did with measuring. What do you think, Chris?
I think you did a fantastic
job. We'll see. So let's take the brackets and put them in. Look at that fit. And we'll set them in when we're all finished, but we'll set them in and look how that goes right in like that. And let's just check this one. Absolutely perfect as well. So there you go. We'll get them in some glue up and clamp up, and then we'll continue. So I've had it in glue up for a few hours. The boxes are looking good. I got them scattered amongst the shop. I thought I'd take a couple minutes and show you what I do to remove glue residue, check for glue residue, and show you how I sand these out first. Okay, so we have put a lot of work into this. We created really great bevels. It all came together. You can see how it's all wrapped around. These are the ones that'll be exposed. So when you're looking at it on the desktop, you can see the grain. I want to see if we can get this. Look at the veneer, okay? Your plywood's here, your veneer is very thin. And what I'm gonna talk about now is you have to do your due diligence to remove all your witness marks, all your writing, but also making sure your glue residue is completely out of there before you put your finish. You have to be very careful because that is really thin veneer and you can burn through it really quick. So you have to do your due diligence. So there's a few things I do first when I break something out of the clamps. One of my go-to tools is a cabinet scraper. And I start really quick before I use mineral spirits to check. See that? That's glue residue. I'll take this, and let's see where my edge is right here. I'll start to scrape some of that residue out. That way there, and you've got to be very careful as you get to the edge here, okay, that you don't burn through. And you've done it before. You take a very aggressive sander and you start sanding here because you want to get the marks off. And what happens is you burn through and you can see the plywood core underneath. So just take your time in doing this. Okay, so I just scraped what I could see with my bare eye. the glue residue. So what I'm going to do is give it its first initial sanding. I'm going to use these little pods, non-skid pods, and put it right up here. I'm using the DTS 400, and the reason I'm doing that, it's an orbital sander. It's not as aggressive as a random orbit. I don't want to burn through the veneer. And I'm just going to do a quick sand on this with 150. This is, most plywood is surface sanded at 120 coming from the factory. Okay, so we scraped, we sanded at 150. Our final sanding is going to be at 180. But one of the things I always do is I lightly dampen the rag with mineral spirits, and I check where I've sanded. And lo and behold, you want to make sure, even before you go, it'll help you two ways. You'll see any area, like right in here, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, there's still, oh, and right in here, look, there's still a little glue residue. So that'll just help me where instead of putting finish on there and then it pops on you, check it first with mineral spirits. Okay, so if you think you did a good job sanding, double check it. And I always do this before my final sanding, before I put finish on. You don't want to put finish on and see this. Look, come in here, Chris, look at this. See that right there? That's glue residue. So what I'll even pop it even more. So what I'll do is I'll take my scraper and I'll just slightly scrape that off like that. So I won't get surprised when I put finish on. So there you go. So if you remember, the walnut edge banding we put on is 1 millimeter. It's very thin still. It's a little bit thicker than the veneer on the walnut plywood itself. But what I want to do is I want to make sure all these are even, and this one has just a hair. Now, I could sand that out, but I'm just going to take a hand plane and just very carefully skewed, and that just eliminates a ton of work if you have a good sharp hand plane. So the next part I'm going to do is, I don't want to balance a sander on this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to balance a hand sanding block, and I'm slowly going to take those edges in, remembering that when I come around here, I got to make sure I bring it around to follow the grain so I don't have any cross grain striations in there. And once again, at the end, I will check to see my scratch pattern and make sure it's okay. Okay, so one of the last steps for these studio rack mount cases is to attach our rack rails. I bought these from a company called Nave Point. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. They're fairly inexpensive. And these were the 4U or 4 unit rack rails. I think they got them all up to 20 U's. It's crazy, 20 units. I will take these off. I just want to drill them out and show you. I will take these off to do the finish afterwards. But I just want to set them right. And what I want to point out is this is a server unit. I mean, these, you can make your own server cases too. I didn't realize when I started this build that this is all standardized. 19 inches here, okay? And these units are all the same thickness. It could be a 2U unit that's a little bit thicker, but it will fit in these cases. So what I want to do is I want to measure this. When I do this, I want not exactly flush, but a little setback. So you know what helps is if I turn this on, and I'm gonna set it in metric because that's what I love working in. Okay, so this is about almost close to 3 millimeter in thickness. I'm gonna take a 4 millimeter shim, and I'm gonna bring my, let's see, this is the left and this is the right, because this is my bottom, this is my top, this is my front. And I'm going to take it, I'm going to go just like this. Okay, come over here, cameraman. I want to show you another tip when I'm setting hardware. I know this is the bottom. There is a little wiggle room in here, so I want to make sure that I reference both brackets on the bottom. And I know this is my front. Okay, first, I use that gauge block in here to get my offset, but I also am going to take myself out of the mix when I begin to drill. Okay, at this time I'm only going to do 2 holes. Now, this is a Vicks bit, it's self-centering. So if I put it in this hole here, you got this, Chris? Now you got to be careful because you don't want to drill through your cabinet. What I'm going to do is just give myself a starter hole and go in ever so slightly here and here. And you see how the bracket's not moving. And I'm ready to go. Okay, so a Vicks bit is tapered. So when I drilled it, it centered itself in the hole. So when I go and I set the little screws in there, it won't offset and tilt the hardware or the rack rails. Okay, let's do a test fit to see if we did this right. We got the rack rails in here. I'm just gonna grab a component here. I believe this is from a server. Oh, look at that. Oh. Little shift over, phew, it does, it works, and look how it lines right up. And it comes with a bunch of screws, these rack rails, and these are 12/24s, and it threads right in. Look at that, everything worked out right. Look, all the holes line up. It's absolutely perfect. That's why we had that little shift. I'll just shift it over a little. Oh, he's gonna love this. Okay, a quick wrap. We got the rails, all the hardware mounted to the cases. Everything looks good. We just got to take them apart again, take the rack rails off, do our final sanding, final checking for any glue residue, apply our finish, and get them shipped out. I hope this was informative on how to cut beveled plywood on the MFT to build beveled case goods. Absolutely perfect. Hey! As we always say, be positive and stay sharp. And I mean it, wicked sharp.